Welcome back to Sip and Talk. I'm Sunny.
I'm Joe.
Today, we're tackling one of those ideas, that gets tossed around a lot, especially now with everyone talking about being your authentic self.
Right.
It's the idea that you shouldn't care what anyone else thinks. Sounds great, doesn't it? So liberating.
Uh-huh. The ultimate freedom, maybe?
But is it even, possible? Really? Or is chasing that kind of absolute freedom just, I don't know, chasing a mirage?
It's a really compelling idea, that complete independence. But then again, we are fundamentally social creatures.
Yeah.
How do you square those two things?
That's exactly the puzzle we're diving into. Our mission today is to unpack this whole thing, looking at it through, 3 different lenses: psychology, philosophy, and sociology.
We can see they can tell us.
Yeah. What do these fields reveal about why we care so much? And what might genuine freedom actually look like? Is opting out of caring even a real option?
We'll dig into the core insights from each area, try to connect the dots, and hopefully give you a clearer picture of how this plays out, maybe in your own life.
Okay, let's start at the beginning then. Psychology. Why, fundamentally, are we humans even wired to give a second thought to what someone else thinks of us?
Well, it really goes way back. It's rooted deep in our evolutionary history. We're profoundly social animals.
Right.
And for, millennia, survival wasn't a solo mission. It depended completely on belonging to a group. Being accepted meant safety, food, partners, the whole deal.
So being sensitive to social cues, to how others reacted to you, that was literally about staying alive.
Pretty much, yeah. Our brains evolved to be really attuned to social acceptance and rejection. Feeling disapproved of can still trigger a response in our nervous system that feels kind of like a physical threat.
Wow.
This is ancient alarm bell saying, hey, you might get kicked out of the group.
And this ties into that concept, the looking glass self. What's that about?
Yeah, that's the idea that our sense of self, who we think we are, isn't just built from the inside out. It's heavily shaped by how we imagine other people see us. We use their reactions or what we think their judgments are like a mirror. And our self-worth often gets tangled up with what we believe that mirror is showing us.
Okay, yeah, that makes total sense. If we think people see us as competent, we start feeling more competent. If we think they see us negatively.
It can really do a number on our own self-view. And that's the downside, right? When this natural wiring gets dialed up too high.
Right.
Over-concern with what others think can fuel anxiety, chip away at self-esteem, and lead to this kind of paralyzing fear of being judged negatively.
And I bet social media just pours gasoline on that fire.
Oh, it absolutely amplifies it. Massively. Suddenly, the group whose opinion you're worried about isn't just your village, it's potentially thousands, millions of strangers.
Yeah.
And the perceived judgments, they're instant, they're public, they're right there in likes and comments. The pressure for that external validation just becomes enormous.
So psychology paints this picture where caring is kind of baked into our biology, our social development. Is there an upside? Or are we just, stuck with this anxiety?
No, not at all stuck. That's the good news. While the tendency to care is natural, psychology also offers real insights into how to manage it. How much power you let it have over you.
Okay. How do you even start doing that?
Well, one key thing is actually pretty simple, conceptually at least. Acceptance. Just acknowledging that, look, judgment from other people is an inevitable part of life.
Right. You can't please everyone.
Exactly. No matter who you are or what you do, someone, somewhere will have an opinion, and it won't always be positive or even fair. Just accepting that reality is step one.
That's tough to really internalize, but yeah, it's true.
It is. Then there are techniques like mindfulness, or even just simple breathing exercises. They can help create a bit of space between that external judgment and your internal reaction.
Ah, okay.
You learn to notice the feeling, okay, I feel judged right now, without letting it hijack your emotional state or dictate what you do next.
So you're observing the reaction, not getting swept away by it.
Precisely. Another useful practice is reframing mistakes or things you perceive as failures. Instead of seeing them as, proof you're inadequate under this big public spotlight, try to see them as information, as learning opportunities. This builds resilience, makes you less brittle when faced with criticism.
And strengthening your own sense of self must be pretty fundamental here, too.
Oh, absolutely crucial. Cultivating self-awareness, really understanding your own values, your strengths, your weaknesses, helps you build an inner compass.
Right.
When you have a stronger sense of who you are and what truly matters to you, external opinions just tend to carry less weight in comparison. Journaling can be super helpful for this, by the way.
So it's like establishing your own internal gold standard instead of always looking outside.
Exactly. And part of that is also consciously, strategically choosing whose opinions you do decide to value.
Oh, okay.
The perspective of a trusted friend or your boss on a work project, that likely deserves more consideration than, some random angry comment online.
Yeah, that makes sense. You get to decide who gets a vote.
You have agency in whose looking glass you choose to really pay attention to. And finally, just surrounding yourself with genuinely supportive people, that acts as a huge buffer.
Your tribe.
Yeah, people who accept you. Their positive regard helps counter the sting of negative judgments from elsewhere. And of course, if it's a persistent struggle, things like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, can offer very specific tools.
So the psychological take is, caring is normal. It's a feature, not a bug. But it's a feature we can learn to kind of modulate, manage, focusing less on the fear, more on building that inner world and choosing our connections wisely.
Exactly. It's a skill you develop. It's not like you're either born caring too much or not caring at all. It's a practice.
Okay, fascinating start. Now let's shift gears a bit from the psychological why we care to the philosophical question. Does freedom, true freedom, really mean ignoring everyone else?
Yeah, this is where philosophy brings in some pretty challenging ideas about just how interconnected we really are.
Okay, tell me about Sartre's concept of the look. That sounds intense.
It is pretty intense. Sartre argued that the simple fact of being seen by another person fundamentally changes your experience of yourself. Their look, their gaze on you can make you feel objectified.
Objectified? How so?
Like you're suddenly perceived through their lens, categorized, pinned down. It can feel like it limits your own sense of being this fluid, authentic self. It's this deep existential challenge.
Yeah.
How do you live authentically when you know you're constantly subject to the interpretation, the judgment of others?
Wow. So just walking down the street, I'm already being sort of defined by how others perceive me. That feels inescapable.
Well, that's kind of Sartre's point. He highlights this paradox.
Mm.
Maybe the only true escape from the look is like non-existence, total invisibility, which obviously isn't living.
Right.
To live is to interact, to be present, to be seen. You can't really be human in society without, being looked upon.
So if being seen is inescapable, does any kind of freedom from opinion exist at all then, philosophically?
This is where other philosophies, like Stoicism, offer a really powerful counterpoint. Their view is that genuine freedom isn't found by changing or escaping external things like poverty or illness or, yes, what other people think.
Okay.
It's achieved by mastering your internal world, by controlling your own judgments, your reactions to those external things.
Like Marcus Aurelius saying public praise is just tongues tapping, like it's just noise.
Exactly that. The Stoics focused entirely on what was within their sphere of control. Their thoughts, their intentions, their actions, based on their own virtues. External validation, criticism, that was just outside data, not relevant to their true well-being and freedom.
So the freedom was inside them, like an inner fortress.
Precisely, untouched by the storms outside. So freedom isn't about the world leaving you alone. It's about you becoming sovereign over your response to the world.
That's a powerful idea.
And Aristotle adds another layer. He suggested that living a virtuous life, a truly authentic life reaching your potential, actually requires engaging with the world. And that means, inevitably, facing criticism.
It's the price of admission, sort of.
You could say that. It's the price of daring to be fully yourself, to contribute something meaningful. If you stand for something, if you take a unique path, you're going to attract both fans and critics.
Yeah, makes sense. Trying to avoid all criticism would mean, what? Shrinking. Doing nothing.
Exactly. Playing it incredibly safe. So from this angle, true freedom involves accepting criticism as a possible outcome of living fully and purposefully rather than trying to engineer a life completely free of it.
And there's also that philosophical idea of being the captain of your own ship, right? Setting your own course based on your values, not just drifting with the tides of public opinion.
Yes, that idea of self-authorship, letting fear of what others think dictate your choices, is really a form of internal imprisonment. It limits your growth, maybe even stops you from acting ethically if your values clash with what's popular.
So philosophy seems to say, okay, being seen is fundamental. Criticism might happen if you live authentically, but real freedom, that's an inside job. Mastering your response, prioritizing your own values, accepting reality without being enslaved by it.
It boils down to inner strength and living intentionally.
Okay, let's widen the lens one more time. Sociology. How does society itself view this whole dance between the individual and others' opinions?
Sociology really emphasizes that society, as a structure, is fundamentally built on and requires this constant interaction, this mutual viewing and recognition we've been talking about.
What does mutual viewing mean in practical terms?
It means that social roles, like being a student, an employee, a parent, a friend, they only really function because they're seen and acknowledged by others within that society. These aren't just labels you stick on yourself in a vacuum. They come with mutual expectations, shared understandings, ways of interacting. Society relies on us generally playing these roles and recognizing them in others.
Okay, so if I decided I genuinely didn't care at all what anyone thought about how I performed my role as, say, a manager, I couldn't actually function effectively as a manager in that social system.
Pretty much, yeah. You'd essentially be opting out of the agreed-upon rules of the game, the terms of social interaction.
Yeah.
Completely ignoring others' views would basically mean withdrawing from meaningful participation in society as we know it.
Even rebels.
Yeah.
They're usually seeking recognition too, right? Just for a different identity.
Exactly. Even those challenging norms are often doing it to gain recognition for an alternative way of being, maybe within a different subgroup or hoping to change the mainstream view. They still operate within a social context of being seen.
So sociology says we can't escape being seen because being seen and recognized is just fundamental to existing within a society.
It's core to social life, yeah. Now, sociology also looks at how modern tools like social media play into this.
Which we already touched on, increases the pressure, the validation seeking.
It absolutely does. It intensifies that whole quest for external validation. Likes, comments, shares become metrics of social standing almost. But, and this is the sociological nuance, social media also gives us unprecedented ways to find very specific communities, our tribe.
Oh, right. People who share your really niche interests or values or life experiences.
Exactly. So while it dials up the volume of potential judgment from the wider world, it also empowers you to find and cultivate connections with groups whose opinions do actually matter to you, people who get you.
Interesting. So it can potentially lessen the sting of judgment from outsiders if you feel validated by your chosen group.
It can function that way, yes. So sociology shows us we're embedded in this web of mutual observation. The choice isn't really escape, but rather navigation. Who do you engage with? Whose view matters in which context? How do you participate within that social structure?
It's less about isolation, more about selective engagement and finding where you belong. Okay, this brings us right back to the core question, pulling all these threads together. Psychology, we're wired to care. Philosophy, maybe freedom is internal. Sociology, being seen is necessary for society.
Okay.
So when someone proclaims, I don't care what anyone thinks, is that real freedom? Or is it often maybe a kind of self-deception?
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. Based on everything we've looked at, genuine freedom in this context probably isn't the total absence of caring or the absence of being seen. That seems, well, impossible and maybe not even desirable if you want to live in the world.
Okay, so if it's not that, what is it then? What does that true freedom look like?
True freedom seems to look more like having real clarity about your own values, your intentions, why you do what you do. It's knowing your own why and holding that as your primary standard.
That internal compass again.
Exactly. And it's a state of not needing constant external validation from everyone out there to affirm that why or your actions. It's the ability to interact within society, fulfill roles, be seen, but remain grounded in your own values. And crucially, this freedom involves accepting that living authentically might mean facing criticism. It might mean not always fitting neatly into what others expect. You accept the potential consequences of your choices.
So it requires both that inner strength and taking responsibility for how you live.
Absolutely. It's a kind of mature self-possession. It's not just a defiant whatever. Now, how do we spot the difference between that and self-deception?
Yeah. How would self-deception show up?
That's often when someone says the words, oh, I don't care, but internally they're feeling anxious or hurt, or they're subtly fishing for approval anyway.
Right.
Or maybe they use not caring as a kind of performance, a way to project this image of being cool or superior, but it's really masking insecurity underneath.
Like loudly declaring, I don't care what they think of my weird hobby, but then secretly refreshing the forum to see if anyone commented.
Exactly. That kind of disconnect between the stated indifference and the internal feeling or the observable behavior, that can be a sign. It can also involve just suppressing genuine hurt or vulnerability when you are judged, rather than acknowledging those feelings and processing them.
So if not caring is just a shield, a defense mechanism.
But it's probably not true freedom, no. It's likely an avoidance strategy or part of a constructed image. The difference really seems to lie in authenticity versus performance.
Okay.
It's the state of your inner world that determines if you're truly free from being enslaved by opinion, not just stating you're free from its existence. So the conclusion seems to be, it's not about achieving absolute freedom from others' opinions that might be unattainable. It's about a complex, ongoing practice.
The practice of what?
Of consciously choosing who to care about, doing the hard inner work on your self-worth and values, and taking responsibility for living your life by your own standards, all while knowing you will be seen and judged.
That makes so much more sense than thinking we can just flip a switch and suddenly become immune to other people.
It shifts the focus, doesn't it? From a kind of passive wish I didn't care, to an active, intentional way of living.
So let's make this really practical. Bringing it all together, how can someone listening actually start living this way? What are some concrete steps based on these insights?
Well, the different perspectives point to several key practices. First, really work on cultivating self-awareness. Start paying close attention to when you feel that pull of others' opinions. What's your immediate internal reaction? Just noticing that feeling without judging yourself for feeling it is a huge first step.
Just acknowledging, okay, I'm feeling that pressure right now.
Right. Second, actively work to clarify and align with your own values. Regularly ask yourself, is this choice I'm making genuinely aligned with what I believe and want? Or am I leaning this way because I'm worried about perception or expectations? Use your values as a filter.
Using that internal compass we talked about.
Exactly. Third, and this is key for building that internal mastery, practice your response. Start small. In situations that aren't high stakes, consciously decide how you will react, or choose not to react, to a specific type of judgment or person that usually gets under your skin.
Like building a new mental muscle.
That's a great way to put it. It's like mental and emotional training. And finally, commit to continuous inner work.
Yeah.
This isn't a one-and-done thing.
Right.
Practice is like consistent journaling, reflection, maybe mindfulness or meditation. These things strengthen that inner core over time, making you less dependent on the winds of external validation.
So it really is an ongoing journey, building inner resilience, building clarity.
It is. It's the practice of cultivating freedom from within, even while living in a world where external perception is unavoidable.
Wow. This has been incredibly clarifying. Thinking about it all from our evolutionary wiring and the looking glass self and psychology, through the philosophical challenge of the look and the stoic focus on internal freedom, to the sociological truth that being seen is just fundamental to social life. It seems really clear that true freedom isn't about somehow escaping human connection or ignoring the world around us.
No, it seems to be a much more sophisticated process of navigating those realities while strengthening your own inner sense of self and purpose.
Yeah. So the core insight, maybe, is that the idea of total freedom from caring what others think, that's probably a myth. But the really powerful truth is that we can cultivate freedom in how we respond to being seen and judged.
That seems to be where the power lies.
It's not about the absence of the gaze, but about developing the strength to define what that gaze means to you and to live by your own compass anyway. It's an ongoing practice, a skill to build, rooted in self-awareness and responsibility.
The power to define yourself ultimately rests within you, not out there.
A really powerful thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into a question that I think touches every single one of us.
It was my pleasure. Really interesting stuff.
We look forward to our next exploration together.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Sip and Talk. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey.